The Eithan Harel Foundation has maintained, since its inception, a steady and well-funded effort in locating and studying phenomena considered outside conventional parameters, both on the Earth's surface and beyond. The scale of resources dedicated to these operations is substantial, and their continuity has been supported by a network of private and corporate capital originating in Israel, as well as operational ties with Israeli state security agencies. These connections have enabled the Foundation to operate in geographic areas where anomalies with significant potential impact on global security have been identified, following guidelines defined by the founder himself under the concept of the final plan. Within this framework, certain regions have gained strategic importance for the organization. Among them, Alaska and Siberia stand out as prime locations for data collection and research development. Alaska, in particular, figures prominently as one of the key sites in the case at hand. Internal Foundation documents note that in the mid-1990s, an incident occurred that drew the attention of its field analysis teams. In 1996, Anchorage Military Hospital admitted 3 members of a local indigenous community within the span of a single week. All were treated as emergencies, presenting clinical symptoms marked by severe physical weakening, persistent drowsiness, and a series of physiological and anatomical abnormalities that defied standard medical terminology. Initially, the hypotheses focused on natural or accidental causes, such as marine animal attacks, possible food poisoning, or, more remotely, exposure to radioactive sources. However, as examinations and patient interviews deepened, these preliminary conclusions were gradually ruled out. The accumulated evidence suggested that the origin of the incident deviated from ordinary explanations and pointed toward a far more complex scenario, one that immediately captured the Foundation's interest. Early testimonies from community members reported that the 3 victims had been found covered by a layer of ice with a reddish tint. Official reports recorded the cause of death as internal hemorrhaging. Nonetheless, more thorough examinations revealed an unusual physiological phenomena. The victim's blood had not circulated freely before death, but had instead become trapped and solidified even within internal structures like the lungs and spinal cord. Medical analyses established that, prior to passing, the individuals remained conscious for approximately 29 hours, enduring escalating pain that began with a widespread burning sensation. The initial stages of discomfort included localized itching in the arms and groin area, which gradually progressed to sharp stabbing pains in the abdomen, skull, and back. While still able to communicate, the victims described the sensation of internal cracking, as if their bodily structures were under unusual strain, along with significant sensory distortions and an intracranial pressure they characterized as unbearable. These manifestations, far from matching any known pathology, immediately drew the attention of the investigators who would later take on the case. When the Eithan Harel Foundation gained access to information about the incident, it quickly deployed a specialized team to interview witnesses and conduct a thorough survey of the area. During this process, the likely source of the tragedy was identified. At the entrance to a network of caves, reddish mineral formations, both stalactites and stalagmites, were found in a semi-frozen, semi-solid state. These structures extended downward toward what appeared to be a frozen flow of reddish liquid that abruptly continued into the cavern system. During the interviews, several tribe members reported that anyone who directly handled these formations while removing them from the cave noticed they hardened even further, causing immediate freezing of the hand that touched them. This phenomenon occurred so swiftly and forcefully that the resulting injuries required urgent medical attention. In later stages, the collected samples were sent to specialized laboratories for analysis, where characterization of the substance and its properties began. The discovered substance, named red ice, was found in volumes exceeding 2,000 liters, allowing for collection and analysis in significant quantities. Its apparent chemical composition bore some resemblance to distilled water, but featured a distinctive visual trait, a particular reddish hue that served as a key marker to identify it in its various states and to distinguish it from other compounds or potential contaminants in the environment. This coloration proved essential for tracking and studying the substance across its different phases. A striking behavior of the red ice is that it defies the conventional physical properties of water. Contrary to what is normally expected, this substance remains liquid even at temperatures below 0 degrees Celsius, and, conversely, solidifies when the temperature rises above that threshold. This reversal of typical physics immediately caught the researchers' attention from the very first tests. Atomic and molecular analyses yielded inconclusive results. The substance's structure appeared to essentially match that of a traditional water molecule. However, its electrochemical behavior challenged the standard laws of enthalpy and thermodynamics known to date. These anomalies led to red ice being classified as a substance with unique characteristics. Its exact nature still cannot be fully explained by current scientific models. One of the most significant and concerning properties of red ice is its ability to contaminate and alter other aqueous substances it comes into contact with. By mechanisms not yet understood, red ice transfers its anomalous properties to various liquids, changing their composition and behavior. Tests showed it can affect not only ordinary ice and water vapor, but also beverages like tea or fruit juices, and even complex solutions such as seawater and blood. The time required for this property transfer to complete varies depending on factors like ambient temperature and the specific chemical makeup of the contaminated material, ranging from brief intervals of 3 minutes to extended periods reaching up to 70 hours. As part of its investigations, the Eithan Harel Foundation conducted experiments at its facilities in Greenland using prisoners serving life sentences from Puerto Rico. During these trials, distinct phases were identified in the interaction process between the red ice and the exposed organisms. In the first stage, known as initial exposure, the subject is in direct contact with the substance, which begins to absorb moisture from the surface of the body. During this period, most individuals report no significant symptoms, except for a mild, localized sensation of warmth. The next stage is marked by the formation of frost at the contact area. This occurs because the heat generated by both the subject and the red ice raises the local temperature above the conventional freezing point. The duration of this phase varies, ranging from 1 minute to 13 hours. During this time, subjects begin to experience intense pain, attributed to the action of crystalline microstructures causing superficial lacerations on the epidermis. Finally, an exponential increase in the substance's temperature triggers a widespread, uncontrolled bodily reaction. This biological response results in an almost total transformation of the individual's cells, which undergo a reversal of their fundamental properties. Due to the relatively slow pace of this process, subjects remain fully conscious for many hours, painfully aware of the progressive deterioration they endure. The Foundation's protocol mandates that all samples of red ice must always be stored in sealed refrigerated tanks, ensuring their temperature does not exceed 0 degrees Celsius when not undergoing testing. It is critical that no water or aqueous solutions be present near the storage area, as this could trigger serious risks. The storage environment must have reliable cooling systems and continuous monitoring to maintain very low temperatures, and any anomalies must be addressed immediately to stabilize the situation. During testing, red ice must be kept in a controlled environment, and personnel are required to wear full protective gear to prevent contamination. After any contact, dehydration and quarantine procedures must be carried out for all exposed materials or individuals. Any contamination by red ice, whether involving moisture or living organisms, must be carefully isolated or eliminated, as this substance poses a potential threat to humanity due to its anomalous properties and its capacity to spread. The cave where the red ice was originally discovered, located in Alaskan territory, was quickly sealed off and secured by U.S. security agencies. As part of the measures taken, nearby indigenous communities were subjected to direct intervention, including relocation to controlled areas and the enforcement of strict confidentiality policies. These actions aim to restrict access, and the dissemination of information related to the discovery and its associated anomalies, establishing an absolute confidentiality framework to safeguard both national security and control over the detected phenomena. One of the earliest areas of focus for the Eithan Harel Foundation revolved around an object cataloged in its archives under the classification of an entity impossible to contain through conventional physical means, and at the same time inaccessible to direct human intervention. Its nature suggests a level of complexity that far exceeds the ordinary understanding of known astronomical phenomena. According to the Foundation's records, this entity resides in Jupiter's atmosphere, where its very existence poses significant challenges to any attempt at systematic classification. The combination of its physical and behavioral traits adds another layer of difficulty in determining its purpose or the reason for its existence, one of the very qualities that make it especially relevant for the organization's ongoing surveillance. To maintain control over the information concerning this entity, the Harel Foundation has deployed covert agents across various astronomical observatories around the globe. Their primary mission is to intercept, censor, or alter any visual record or data that might reveal the object's presence, thereby preventing public knowledge of its existence. Reports and accounts available up to the year 2025 indicate that this surveillance network continues to operate without interruption, ensuring both the discretion of its operations and the preservation of secrecy surrounding the entity. In parallel with its ground-based surveillance, the Harel Foundation has developed and placed into orbit a series of satellites, some of which operate in coordination with space agencies and private projects, including programs from the National Aeronautics and Space Administration and certain initiatives connected to Elon Musk's companies. The primary function of these satellites is the continuous monitoring of the entity's activities, especially its behavior within Jupiter's well-known Great Red Spot, where it is believed to remain in a state of latency and self-repair. As a secondary function, these devices are equipped with systems designed to interfere with the reconstruction process of the structure should it reach an estimated threshold of 75% completion. This dual purpose enables both observation and preventive control of the entity. In addition, the Foundation has established a network of electromagnetic interference satellites known as Barrier. This system is intended to intercept and record any transmission directed at the object, as well as to analyze the mechanisms through which the entity sustains and restores its internal structures. According to the most detailed records available as of the year 2004, it has been confirmed that the entity has the ability to camouflage itself within the environment of the Great Red Spot, suggesting that this atmospheric formation may, at least in part, be a byproduct of the entity itself. This observation has led to the hypothesis that the machine may have been active for at least 1,000 years, possibly extending back to the discoveries of Giovanni Cassini in 1655, who documented anomalies in the Great Red Spot that could be associated with this structure. The Foundation's protocols in the event of a failure to prevent the entity's repair are considered highly sensitive. Internal records define this scenario as one of extreme significance, with direct implications for the historical and political configuration of the nations involved during that period. The activation of such protocols would require immediate and coordinated intervention across multiple states, given the potential impact that the entity's full reactivation could have on infrastructure and the stability of political and social systems. This structure has been defined in the Foundation's archives as a mechanical object of colossal dimensions and extremely advanced design, located in the lower atmosphere of Jupiter. Its visual discovery took place in 1963 from the Vatican Observatory, with the information transmitted directly to Yale University for study and analysis. Although the structure shows visible damage, it is suspected that, given the technological superiority of its design, it possesses antimatter-based weaponry capable of generating significant spatial disturbances and large-scale atmospheric phenomena. It is estimated that the damage to the structure was caused by an impact with the moon Iapetus, which would explain the notable dent observed on that satellite. After the impact, the structure came to rest in its current position within Jupiter's Great Red Spot. Since then, it has deployed swarms of mechanical drones tasked with gathering materials for its repair, operating both on nearby moons and within the deeper layers of Jupiter's atmosphere. Drones have even been detected near Saturn's atmosphere, indicating an operational reach of considerable extent. Computational models developed up to the year 2004 estimate that the structure's reconstruction advances at an approximate rate of 0.12% per year, with growth increasing exponentially each decade. This projection suggests that during the 17th century, when the Great Red Spot was first observed, the pace of reconstruction would have been practically negligible, reflecting an extremely low rate of repair. Despite the damage it has sustained, the object retains a set of capabilities that render it virtually indestructible against any known human technology. Among these are a practically limitless energy source, advanced electromagnetic shielding, weapon systems capable of disintegrating matter, and autonomous repair mechanisms that operate continuously. The technological gap between humanity and whatever controls the structure makes its destruction by current means effectively impossible. In theory, a colossal electromagnetic pulse could disrupt its functions, but no such technology has yet been developed. Since 1996, it has been detected that the structure receives electromagnetic transmissions originating from the Triangulum galaxy more than 3 million light-years away. How it arrived in the solar system, as well as the methods it employs to maintain communication across such vast distances, remain entirely unknown, suggesting that its origins may even predate the very emergence of the scientific revolution on Earth. Among the available records, it is documented that between 1998 and the year 2000, the structure consistently received an encoded message which, after decryption studies, was interpreted as an order to accelerate the repair of its damage. This interpretation is based on encrypted code analysis theories and therefore cannot be stated with absolute certainty. Up until 2004, the barrier interference system has succeeded in intercepting most transmissions directed at the object, though the true effectiveness of this method cannot be precisely quantified and remains subject to ongoing monitoring and evaluation by the Foundation. In the year 1655, Giovanni Cassini, the renowned Italian astronomer and mathematician, devoted his observations to the planet Jupiter, whose atmospheric phenomena already posed a challenge to the scientific understanding of the time. It was in that context that he recorded the presence of what would later become known as the Great Red Spot, a gigantic system remarkable for both its uniqueness and its dimensions, visible even through the rudimentary telescopes of that century. During his studies, Cassini not only noted the striking contrast of that formation on the planet's surface, but also described certain irregularities that eluded the explanatory frameworks available in his era. Among these anomalies, he noted the presence of what he interpreted as a structure of unusual characteristics, its appearance difficult to classify. According to his records, it was an object of colossal proportions, comparable in size to the Great Red Spot itself, that seemed to alter its shape with slow, uneven movements. Cassini observed how the entity appeared to emerge and submerge within the planet, as though passing through its layers in an erratic pattern that did not correspond to ordinary celestial motions. The impression it conveyed was that of a vast machine, though its behavior suggested organic qualities as well. The surviving description emphasizes that the object deformed in a manner reminiscent of certain marine organisms, which gave the structure a hybrid character difficult to place squarely between the purely mechanical and the living. Its surface and movements seemed to respond to a camouflaging ability that allowed it to blend into the planetary environment, even at times when it drifted away from Jupiter's visible mass. This reinforced the sense that it was not merely an atmospheric phenomenon, but something that, by its behavior, appeared to operate according to a logic of its own. Unable to explain the nature of what he was witnessing, Cassini chose to interpret it in terms familiar to him. He initially mistook it for a satellite, assuming it could be a natural body orbiting the planet, though with properties very different from those known at the time. Yet the singular aspect of the observation lay in the fact that, rather than conforming to the expected patterns of an astronomical object, this entity seemed to act independently. as if it responded to dynamics alien both to celestial physics and to the idea of divine order, which in the thought of that era was assumed to govern the cosmos. With the respect owed to the most illustrious crown of Christendom, I dare to send to your majesty a memorial concerning certain phenomena observed by my own hand upon the star the ancients named Jupiter. Being of a temperate disposition and no friend to rashness, I would not write these lines were it not that what I beheld through my lens exceeds, in both wonder and dread, the limits of what I have until now held certain in natural philosophy. Since last month, I have returned with particular diligence to the contemplation of that great spot which, like an eternal wound, appears upon the disk of Jupiter. With an optical tube of my own making, imperfect, yet faithful enough, I have noted changes within that spot which cannot be ascribed to vapors, nor to the shadows of its moons, nor to mere accidents of sight. I have seen, sire, that within that region, glowing as though it were a fresh incision, there emerges and withdraws at intervals a structure of shifting form, so vast that at moments it equals the spot itself. The outline of this thing is not fixed. At times it resembles a frame of polished metal, at others it writhes like a sea creature, and again it veils itself in the colors and bands of the planet, so that it merges with it and vanishes altogether from our sight. The most singular aspect lies in its movement. It does not proceed like the celestial bodies obedient to their course, but rather enters the planet's visible sphere and departs from it with a hesitant slowness, as though testing the medium, and with an erratic caution I have witnessed more in living creatures than in machines. At certain moments, I observed that around it swam, permit me the term, myriads of tiny figures that gathered and dispersed as if in its service. Your Majesty will forgive me if I cannot say whether they be automata or animals. Their outlines, resembling mollusks, I have sketched as faithfully as my lenses and my hand allow. At first, I thought it might be a new satellite, unrecorded by either the ancients or the moderns. Yet I soon understood that it obeys no law of orbit, and that its contortions are not of a sphere, but of artifice. If I am mistaken, may heaven forgive me, but if I am correct, I fear to say that in those heights there is some manufacture, perhaps wounded by collision or misfortune, that repairs itself with the aid of lesser servitors. I have noted, moreover, that when the structure reveals itself in greater nakedness, the great oval expands and gathers force, as if the work itself stirred Jupiter's airs and inflamed them in fury. There are nights, sire, when the contemplation of Jupiter is accompanied by a muted murmur within my instruments, as though the machine, if machine it be, received messages not of light, but of another sort of breath I cannot name, invisible signals that come neither from the sun nor from the nearest stars, but, God help me, from some remote province of the firmamenti. I do not understand these things. I only set down that, when the murmur grows more insistent, the congregation of the smaller ministers, those mollusks of strange metal, becomes more numerous and more diligent. All that I have written, however unspeakable it may seem, I set down with the modesty of one who knows he may err. I am not ignorant, sire, that there are those who ascribe all the motions of the heavens to higher wills, nor do I deny providence. Yet if your Majesty should deem it prudent, I beg that these observations be kept under seal of state, for such novelties might kindle reckless disputes and scandals among philosophers and theologians. And if what I have seen be no illusion, it would be fitting as well, when France shall so decide, to provide greater lenses and discreet men who, without clamor, might continue this watch and record any change in the magnitude or perfection of the thing. I fear by a conjecture I cannot well ground, that should its restoration reach a certain sufficiency, its power would surpass all that our species has yet imagined, and then it would not be our quills, but other arts that would be forced to reckon with it. I humbly submit to your Majesty a number of sketches and ephemerides of the nights when it revealed itself with greater clarity, marked with the symbols I employ in my notebooks. Should this letter merit your attention, I, Giovanni Domenico Cassini, consecrate from this day forth my lens and my labors to the crown of France, whose light, more constant than that of the mutable heavens, illumines the good arts and honors the truth. Back in 1997, public health officials in the state of Wyoming recorded an unusual cluster of respiratory and dermatological complaints in a residential neighborhood west of Cheyenne. The cases shared a common thread that was hard to ignore: homes sealed shut with unusually high humidity, heating systems running out of season, and during several visits, a marked tendency for residents to host frequent gatherings with friends and relatives. At first glance, the pattern suggested an outbreak of ordinary household mold. However, direct examination, including optical and fluorescent microscopy of environmental tape lifts and skin smears, consistently came back negative. The mismatch between the clinical symptoms and the absence of microscopic findings prompted a formal alert to the Department of Health and, given its potentially unconventional nature, the involvement of a biosafety team from the Department of Defense. The environmental inspection shifted toward indirect documentation. Airtight closed-circuit cameras were placed in transitional spaces, entryways, service corridors, and ventilated attics, and scheduled for periodic photographic sweeps with broad-spectrum flashes. Within 48 hours, the images revealed sprawling mycelial colonies with filamentous morphology and concentric banding across wooden slats, fabrics, and lacquered surfaces. Strikingly, those same surfaces, when viewed with the naked eye or under standard field microscopy on site, appeared spotless. This split behavior, utter invisibility to direct observation yet consistently detectable through photographic or video methods, defined the operational signature of what would later be investigated in greater depth by selected members of the Eithan Harel Foundation in the United States, cited at the time as an expert commission in anomalous cases of national concern. The American teams, working alongside the Foundation specialists, combined environmental sampling with airflow tracers to map the funguses spread within the homes. It showed a clear preference for microenvironments with a sustained relative humidity of 65% and indoor temperatures between 75 and 82 degrees Fahrenheit, conditions that the residents themselves unconsciously helped create, adjusting thermostats, disabling ventilation, and drying clothes indoors. Structured interviews revealed subtle yet consistent behavioral changes: heightened sociability, a diminished aversion to crowding, and an increased tolerance for earthy or even sweetish odors. The working theory was that the spores acted as sensory modulators, altering thermal and olfactory perception and, by extension, influencing environmental choices that favored colonization. To reduce the risk of spread beyond the neighborhood, the Department of Defense established a sanitary cordon with entry and exit controls, while the Department of Health coordinated syndromic surveillance in primary care centers. Personal sampling, nasopharyngeal and oropharyngeal swabs, along with skin impressions on sterile slides, was stored in sealed capsules and processed through a fully contained workflow: airtight culture chambers, automated nutrient delivery, and a strict ban on manual handling. Even so, the preparations remained negative under direct examination. Only the recordings from internal cameras confirmed their growth. Staining assays, periodic acid shift, methenamine, silver, along with pan-fungal polymerase chain reaction and metagenomic sequencing, produced inconclusive or paradoxical results, consistent with an agent that escapes detection whenever human observation is directly involved. The clinical evaluation of moderate cases revealed macerative lesions in skin folds which, under macrophotography, displayed faint fungal plaques layered over what appeared to be intact skin. In 2 households, visual records captured mycelial growth directly on the scalp and along hairline implantation sites, yet the affected individuals, looking in a mirror, saw nothing. No classic mycotoxins were identified. The physiological decline in advanced stages seemed to stem instead from relative hypoxia, opportunistic infections, and thermal stress caused by the host's own environmental modifications. In parallel, a transmission study was conducted. Social network models, built from telephone records and neighborhood contact logs, showed that households with the highest frequency of visits carried heavier photographic spore loads and exhibited shorter mycelial doubling times. This correlation reinforced the behavioral hypothesis. The organism does not merely tolerate its host, it manipulates them to maximize air exchange and fomite transfer between homes. The presymptomatic phase, 7 to 10 days, according to retrospective reconstruction, aligned with peaks in social interaction. In response to the evidence, joint containment measures were enacted. Samples were transferred to a high biosafety complex, Biological Research Area 12, under a strict regime, sealed culture chambers within an airtight room, accessible only through an airlock, nutrient delivery by robotic systems, and continuous surveillance via hermetic cameras with daily integrity checks. All entering personnel used biosafety level 5 suits with respirators and underwent full-spectrum antifungal decontamination upon exit. The objective was twofold: to guarantee uninterrupted observation, the only reliable means of detection, and to eliminate any potential escape vector beyond visual monitoring. From a mechanistic standpoint, 3 non-exclusive explanatory frameworks were considered. First, interference with human sensory transduction, for example, modulation of olfactory or trigeminal pathways, or cortical adaptation, which could block awareness of fungal stimuli while preserving their optical record. Second, anisotropic optical properties of the mycelium that altered reflectance under direct human observation, but not through electronic sensors. Finally, a third possibility, an agent-observer interaction phenomenon, in which the mere presence of a human observer transiently modified the organism's state or its observable signature. None of these hypotheses fully accounted for the invisibility under human-operated microscopy, but all agreed that device-mediated recording was indispensable. The eradication in the Cheyenne neighborhood was achieved through a combination of forced dehumidification, sustained cross-ventilation, thermal cycling, and nebulization with broad-spectrum biocides, guided exclusively by videographic verification. Homes were declared clean only when time series imaging confirmed the absence of growth on previously colonized substrates. Environmental education was also introduced to reduce risky behaviors such as the accumulation of damp textiles and the sealing of vents, while a monitoring program with cameras was established in high-traffic households. Over the years, however, it became clear that the intervention had taken a toll on the homes and especially on the health of the elderly. In the short term, this led to the abandonment of the neighborhood, which, as the years passed, was left uninhabited and eventually offered for sale to industries seeking locations far from densely populated urban centers. One possible hypothesis regarding the origin of this fungal entity suggests that it was a byproduct of microbiological research conducted during the 1970s, aimed at bioremediation and the study of the urban microbiome in enclosed environments, research that was ultimately intended to be tested on battlefields outside American territory. In that context, several fungal strains were subjected to directed selection to optimize their ability to metabolize synthetic compounds and persist in humid domestic settings. This experimental process may have unintentionally fostered unique traits: the production of volatile mixtures capable of subtly altering human perception, interfering with the conscious evaluation of texture and form. As a result, the colonies remained invisible to the human eye and to microscopes directly operated by people, though their presence could be objectively captured through electronic imaging devices. Following their accidental release into urban environments, whether through malpractice or the inadvertent transport of contaminated materials, these strains found ideal conditions in homes whose structures, despite incorporating recirculating ventilation systems, interaction with local environmental fungi consolidated their adaptation and conferred the ability to modulate human behavior, increasing sociability, influencing interior temperatures, and encouraging microenvironments favorable to growth. The outbreak documented in Cheyenne in 1997 may thus be understood as the accidental manifestation of a rapid co-adaptation between microbial biology, environmental chemistry, and the limits of human perception, an interaction that may well have been born from
This machine you're
military
seeing
intent.
on the screen was discovered in 1991 in a residential neighborhood of St. Petersburg, back in the final years of the Soviet Union.
The find happened by chance when a city maintenance crew was inspecting a building intended for local administrative offices and came across what seemed to be an ordinary device, a coffee vending machine placed in a break area on the second floor. At first glance, the unit looked no different from the standard models of the time, except for a touchpad arranged in the English layout with Latin characters. In the first weeks, municipal technicians noticed unusual behavior from the machine, including its ability to dispense liquids that didn't match any known programming. They began running improvised tests, requesting coffee, water, soft drinks, alcohol, and even corrosive solutions, sometimes making spelling mistakes when typing the names in English. To their astonishment, the machine produced the exact liquids entered through the keypad, even those that under normal circumstances could not exist in liquid form, such as molten metals or concentrated acids, without the disposable cups it provided showing any visible damage. Given the complexity of the phenomenon and the institutional collapse of the time, the Eithan Harel Foundation, based in Tel Aviv, offered to take responsibility for containing and studying the object. The proposal was framed as a strategic negotiation with Soviet authorities. In exchange for the transfer of the machine, the foundation would assume full responsibility for scientific research and containment of any associated risks, while guaranteeing the discovery would remain undisclosed. Their involvement included deploying a specialized team in anomalous phenomena and setting up a temporary laboratory at the site of origin before moving the device to Israel for dismantling and safekeeping. In Tel Aviv, the machine was subjected to a rigorous protocol of isolation and analysis. Preliminary examinations suggest the mechanism operates through a quasi-autonomous system of molecular transmutation capable of reorganizing atoms and chemical bonds to produce whatever liquids the user requests. High-resolution tomography and quantum spectroscopy inspections revealed that the device houses a complex network of microconduits and dimensional cavities, with a geometry impossible to reproduce through conventional engineering. These conduits appear to function as channels of latent matter, storing information about the molecular structure of previously generated substances and reconstructing them on demand. It has been theorized that the device contains vibrational resonance cores, submicrophysical structures that allow for the temporary stabilization of extremely corrosive or unstable liquids, preventing the destruction of the dispensed cups. These cores may interact with fields of quantum probability, which would explain both the machine's ability to produce materials that do not naturally exist and its apparent memory of previously requested liquids. From an engineering standpoint, the machine appears to integrate a hybrid system of mechanical automation and quantum manipulation of matter, in which the touch sensors, keypad, and internal mechanisms function as an interface with a plane of reality that is only partially accessible to direct observation. The device can discern the user's intention through textual input and translate it into precise structural configurations of liquid matter. The study of its internal replenishment cycles has led to the hypothesis that the machine contains a reservoir of virtual matter with latent energy that self-regulates to sustain the flow of liquids and prevent saturation of its internal channels. The length of its inactive period seems to correlate with the complexity and volume of substances dispensed, suggesting a kind of quantum digestion of the transmuted materials. When the unusual incident occurred at the Kazakh mines of Western Karasira in the year 2002, the scale of the disaster quickly drew the attention of both local authorities and the international community. A sudden and violent explosion hurled up from the depths of the tunnels a mixture of mud and dark, oily-looking fluids that bore a superficial resemblance to crude oil, though with one unsettling peculiarity: the substance lacked any flammable properties. It surged rapidly through the mine's main access routes, trapping dozens of workers. 37 people lost their lives at the site, while nearly 20 were officially listed as missing. Their remains never recovered in the subsequent search operations. The magnitude of the tragedy led the government of Kazakhstan to request international assistance. Aware of the logistical challenges and the dangerous conditions, local authorities formally sought the collaboration of American rescue teams specialized in industrial collapses and underground disasters. At that time, however, the wartime commitments of the United States had drastically curtailed its ability to respond abroad. Instead, the mission was taken over by a delegation from the Harel Foundation, a private entity based in Tel Aviv that had already been working closely with the United States Department of Defense and with organizations tied to the European Union on projects of applied research and crisis management. Upon arriving at the site, the Foundation team encountered a contradictory scene. Although official records stated that mining operations had begun in 1996 and that extraction was still described as incipient, the facilities showed a level of wear and deterioration uncharacteristic of an operation barely 6 years old. Corroded walkways, blackened walls, and tunnels that looked as though they had endured decades of mining activity raised immediate questions. The stark disparity between official records and the site's condition triggered the Harel Foundation's internal anomaly detection protocols. Following those protocols, the area was placed under strict isolation. Security perimeters were established, outside access was restricted, and an initial phase of systematic exploration of the affected tunnels was carried out. Every descent underground was preceded by rigorous checks, both to prevent further accidents and to collect samples of the substance that had caused the tragedy. From the very first day, the Kazakh government made clear its interest in receiving constant updates on the findings. Yet the technical reports did not circulate freely. A directive issued directly from the Foundation's headquarters in Tel Aviv made it clear that all disclosures had to be channeled exclusively through them. Even the country's highest political authorities were forced to comply with this condition, cementing the Foundation's complete autonomy in controlling the case. What they found just a few meters inside the mining complex was an area packed with a vast array of heavy machinery and electrical devices. Its layout suggested an abandoned power station, though the condition of certain machines hinted it might still be operational. The facilities, however, were in a state of extreme neglect. Corroded sections, loose cables scattered around, and massive equipment crowding what felt like endless confines. The flooring at that level was relatively well preserved, though marked with signs of wear and occasional dents, while the walls showed greater neglect, with exposed beams and small pipes in several sections. As they moved through this immense network of corridors, one striking detail was the constant noise of machinery, yet the sound never seemed to come from a specific source. Some of it resembled the thud of pistons, bursts of steam from pipes, or perhaps faulty electrical contacts sparking the wiring overhead. The corridors themselves were narrow and twisted, laid out with little consistency, as if each section had been designed for entirely different purposes in different eras. Along the way, the team encountered gates blocking access, though most were so heavily rusted that they posed no real obstacle. In certain sectors, huge bundles of cables sprawled across the ground or jutted out from the walls and ceiling, often accompanied by voltage meters or tangled electrical devices. These cables carried large amounts of electricity, most likely connected to machinery elsewhere on the level. Extreme caution was necessary when approaching them, as visible sparks could be seen leaping from both the walls and the floor. Although some degree of consistency in the wiring system was noted, minor accidents that occurred while attempting to connect devices to the outlets confirmed that tampering with the electrical setup was entirely out of the question. Amid the many corridors and narrow passageways, they came across massive metal doors that opened easily, leading into areas that looked different yet served no clear purpose. As members of the Harel Foundation pushed further into the zone, they began to notice certain patterns, spaces in the world that seemed completely concealed yet hinted at fragments of parallel dimensions, somehow functioning even within these very same dimensions. Among these newly discovered sections, branching from what were assumed to be the main Kazakh tunnels, they found what became known as the machine rooms. These rooms contained every kind of apparatus and electrical equipment. Much like the entry area, they were not especially spacious, offering just enough room to hold the machinery and a few pieces of furniture. They followed the same general design as other parts of the level, though curiously, some sections were brightly lit by sources that appeared to emanate from deep within the earth itself. Scattered throughout were boxes filled with assorted items, extension cords, noise-canceling headphones, spare metal parts, copper wires, antennas, and tools such as screwdrivers and wrenches. Because of thermal instability, the machines would suddenly begin releasing strong odors of combustion processes, later identified as highly toxic fumes. The stench was so penetrating it seeped through respirator filters, which were found to be severely compromised for those who remained exposed too long. Another section, referred to as the industrial baths, consisted of empty vestibules that, due to certain features, strongly resembled the classic layout of a public restroom. There were shower-like structures and benches fixed against the walls. The size of these rooms varied, though they were generally quite spacious. Many of the gray tiles covering parts of the walls were cracked or missing, while the concrete walls and floors bore stains of moisture and corrosion. In some areas, damaged drains could be seen, alongside other pipes left rusted and exposed. The lighting in the area flickered constantly, at times shutting off for long stretches and plunging everything into complete darkness. In such moments, the groups that had set up their bases in these rooms, which, according to Harel Foundation reports, were among the most stable and least hostile, claimed to have captured countless electronic voice phenomena and noises that should not have been audible in a place so isolated. Even so, none of these auditory anomalies had any apparent effect on the explorers' minds. On the contrary, they actively studied the sounds. Overall, this network of crumbling corridors and chambers was never fully explored, mainly because of thermal hazards and the difficulty of accessing the lower levels. In those deeper areas, the walls showed even greater signs of corrosion, and the darkness was so absolute that even the most powerful floodlights could not illuminate the far ends of some passageways. What's more, the deeper they went, the more frequently they encountered patches of black viscous substance coating the floor. The same material believed to have triggered the original incident, which by then was shaping up to be far more than a mere mining accident. Thermal anomalies proved to be another major challenge. In sections with the highest concentration of machinery, average temperatures rose to nearly 104 degrees Fahrenheit. Strangely, the farther down they descended, the hotter it became, the increase occurring gradually level by level. At the deepest accessible points, specialized equipment operating without human presence recorded peak temperatures as high as 142 degrees Fahrenheit, conditions far too dangerous for direct exposure. It was also observed that vapors released from pipes or generators connected to the machinery on this level often accumulated in certain hallways and rooms. These vapors were found to be toxic when inhaled in excess, their effects comparable to breathing in large amounts of tobacco smoke. Moreover, they appeared to possess an addictive quality. Some explorers who admitted to having smoked during adolescence reported feeling an overwhelming and involuntary urge to continue inhaling the fumes. The origin of the gas remains unknown, though the leading theory is that it is emitted by the black liquid that covers the floor when it comes into contact with warmer areas, particularly machinery that seemed to burn from within. It was in this context that, in 2003, barely a year after the Kazakh disaster, a case from Poland came into the hands of the Foundation. One that at first glance seemed unrelated. The discovery of a hatch in a residential neighborhood of Warsaw by two teenagers, later known as the Warsaw Machine Case. Local police managed only to document the presence of a tunnel and an unidentified machine before the boys were found in critical condition on the banks of the Vistula River. However, photographs recovered from their camera revealed details unmistakable to Harel specialists. The corroded pipes lining the walls, the mold-infested corridors, and above all, the electric hum accompanied by impossible underground lights bore an uncanny resemblance in both aesthetics and function to the galleries of Kazakhstan. Professor Marek Niedzwiecki, whose academic background blended teaching in physics with occasional engineering work, soon emerged as a central figure. For the Foundation, the discovery beneath his home could not have been the work of a lone individual, yet his biography suggested involvement in experiments aimed at replicating, on a domestic scale, the very same conditions in Kazakhstan that had generated dimensional portals. The burns documented in his medical records prior to his death reinforced this hypothesis. Direct exposure to thermal and energetic processes strikingly similar to those observed in the mine.